How's it going, everyone? So we have a lot to talk about when it comes to winter storms moving through the United States, and it's of course due to this polar vortex we're going to see over the next week or two that's going to allow for enough cold air to exist for significant winter storms that impact the United States, but also to enhance the instability to where we could see those winter storms develop like we see right here on Monday, January 20th. A major winter storm is expected to impact the Northeast, and it's highly certain at this point regarding this specific snowstorm. But I'll get to that in just 1 second because we have another snowstorm that's a little bit more in the long-term future that could bring historic snowfall in some areas of the southeast, where this close to the Gulf of Mexico, you typically aren't used to seeing snowfall at all during the winter time frame. And for many of you guys, this could be your first time you've seen snowfall in nearly over or a little bit more than a decade. For example, in New Orleans, the last measurable snowfall you saw was on December 2009. It's now 2025, so it's been a little bit more than 15 years since you've seen your last measurable snowfall in New Orleans, and same goes for a lot of these areas. So in terms of certainty of this storm system, it seems like we're getting to that point where the forecast is getting highly certain. It's fairly certain at this point. Somewhere in the Gulf Coast, you will experience accumulating snowfall because both the GFS model and the European model are in very good agreement with each other in regards to bringing snowfall right over the Gulf Coast. So here's the GFS model at the 18Z Tuesday point on January 21st, we see that there's moderate to heavy snowfall right over Houston. Same could be said for New Orleans. Much of Louisiana, Baton Rouge gets involved, and continuing to move forward, we see that snowfall extends further eastward into the Biloxi area of Mississippi, the Alabama Gulf Coast, so Mobile, Alabama. You should receive your first snowfall you've seen in years, and same goes for the Florida Panhandle, where for the state of Florida in general, the last time you've seen accumulating snowfall was in 2014, so it's been around 11 years since we've last seen accumulating snowfall in Florida, but it's expected right over the western panhandle. So Pensacola, you need to be prepared for accumulating snowfall. Same goes for the areas a little bit further northward up the Florida panhandle, and we see that it doesn't move very far to the east as in the GFS model scenario. It mainly brings us snowfall just to the west of Tallahassee, while just to the east of Tallahassee, it's primarily a rain event. But this is where we do see a decent amount of disagreement between the computer models regarding how large an area of snow exactly is. Because if we were to take a look at the European model scenario at around the same time period, we see this snowfall moves a lot further northward. In the GFS model scenario, the area of snow is a lot slimmer. It barely reaches South Carolina, but in this scenario, we see the snowfall move as far north as the Delmarva Peninsula, and it's bringing heavy snowfall right up along the southeast Atlantic coast, where Myrtle Beach, Charleston, it's also been a while in those areas since you've received accumulating snowfall. You guys are experiencing heavy snowfall in a scenario like this. Savannah gets involved. We see the snowfall impact Tallahassee in the European model scenario, and we could even see a wintry mix as far to the east as Jacksonville, Florida, which really goes to show how aggressive the European model is when it comes to bringing snowfall right over the southeast, where it's a much more elongated storm. So you're probably asking, what's the reason for this? Well, the reason is because the European model expects a stronger amount of cold air to exist over the United States by the time we approach this Tuesday. And what that means is that we see a more significant jet stream dip that not only enhances the instability, but that also forces the jet stream winds to come from more of a southeasterly direction to the point where it pushes a lot of this moisture further northward, while in the GFS model scenario, the jet stream dip isn't as significant. There isn't as much cold air, so we see this storm system mainly move towards a more easterly direction rather than a northeasterly direction like the European model is forecasting right here. So here's the GFS model's forecast again. We see that this storm's the precipitation mainly moves towards due east direction, so we don't see much of any snowfall at all in the GFS model scenario. So at this point, I'll still lean more to the European model's forecast being more correct. It has been the more reliable model over the past few winter storms that have been moving through the United States, and also it does have a better handle when it comes to storm systems like this, as I do believe that there's a slight edge to the European model's forecast when it comes to snowfall. I do expect the snowfall to move further northward and the snowfall to even move further eastward as well, thanks to the stronger amount of cold air. So but we can't completely rule out the GFS model either. So let me show you guys the North Atlantic right now, the 500 millibar height anomaly, because it gives a better idea of what exactly will determine how large the area of snow is, as well as who exactly it affects. So here's the 84 hour mark in the GFS model scenario, and the key difference I want to point out is happening right over the northern Atlantic, where we see that the ridging is weaker by this point. And what this means is that this cold air, rather than sink and meander over the eastern United States, rather spreads out more and is more elongated to the point where we see the jet stream not dip as far south, and that forces the winds to move from an easterly direction, which forces the storm system not to really go further northward, and it also reduces the instability with less cold air over the eastern United States. Compare that to the European model at the same forecast hour. We do see that there's just a little bit more ridging, which means that that cold air is centered a little bit closer to the United States. A better example is 72 hour mark. We see that the ridging is much stronger, the cold air and the northwesterly flow is more focused over the eastern United States. So we see a stronger storm and a jet stream that forces the storm further northward and the snow further northward. But in the GFS model scenario at the same time period, we see that this storm system this ridge definitely weakens more, so we see less of a strong northwesterly flow. So the key thing that will determine whether we see a forecast close to the GFS model scenario or the European model scenario is a ridging right over the northern Atlantic. If it's stronger, then we should expect a more potent storm for the southeast that also brings snowfall further southward and eastward, and pretty much brings snowfall in a much larger area in general, and even up towards mid-Atlantic. But if the GFS model scenario is correct, where we see less ridging, then I'll say it's less like the area of snowfall will be less elongated. But what I could say for certain at this point is that Houston, New Orleans, the western panhandle of Florida, as well as the Gulf Coast of Alabama, Mississippi, be prepared for a significant winter storm where you should expect anywhere between 3 to 5 inches for the most part, to 5 to 8 inches in more localized areas. So let me show you guys the forecast, snowfall forecast from both the computer models at this point. So here's a forecast right now for from the European model for the southeast. So we do see a pretty large area of 3 to 5 inches of snow. This impacts areas like North Carolina, and we even see areas where you could receive over 6 inches of snow. Look at Myrtle Beach in Charleston. Right now, the forecast is receiving around 7 inches of snowfall, which could reach historic proportions there when it comes to accumulating snowfall. The western panhandle of Florida could experience anywhere between 1 to 3 inches of snowfall. And of course, for a lot of us northerners, that might not seem like a lot, but for the Gulf Coast, that is easily enough to cause just very dangerous road conditions. You need to be aware that in the southeast, they aren't prepared for winter storms like this, and there really aren't any plows, there aren't salt trucks salting the roads very often there, because it happens so rarely that they're not prepared for events like these, which means that the roads, even for the snowstorm that's as little as 1 to 3 inches, could cause just very dangerous road conditions right over the western panhandle of Florida. So you want to be aware of that. Same story could be said for the Gulf Coast of Alabama and Mississippi, where you could expect anywhere between 3 to 5 inches of snowfall. And then for New Orleans, you should expect maybe around 3 to 5 inches of snow as well. And we could see the areas a little bit further eastward in New Orleans hover more around that 6-inch range. So Baton Rouge, definitely prepare. Lake Charles, the Houston area should get involved with maybe around 1 to 3 inches of snowfall. So definitely be prepared for significant impacts all throughout the southeast. It's still a bit more uncertain if this snowfall will move further northward up into North Carolina, South Carolina, and even this far northward into Georgia. But I'll say the European model, it has the edge when it comes to this forecast at this point. But I'll keep you guys up to date if we do see any changes regarding this forecast. Now, taking a look at the GFS model, and the reason why I do say there's a high amount of certainty, at least for the Gulf Coast states when it comes to snowfall, is due to the fact that the GFS model is also showing a good amount of agreement regarding how much snowfall it wants to bring right over the Gulf Coast. So we clearly see into Texas, New Orleans, Mississippi, and on the Gulf Coast of Alabama, you should expect a very similar amount of snowfall, 3 to 5 inches. But we see that the clear disagreement we're seeing is anywhere pretty much just to the east of Tallahassee, where the GFS model doesn't bring much of any snowfall to South Carolina, Georgia, as well as North Carolina, compared to the European model, which is why I say anywhere that's just to the east of Tallahassee, that's where you definitely need to be more aware of the forecast and stay tuned for further updates, because there's still a decent amount of disagreements with computer models. But I still will say you're more likely than not going to receive at least some sort of snowfall from this storm system, more likely what the European model is stating at this point. But for these areas, you need to prepare now for a significant winter storm. To show further evidence that it's highly likely you're going to receive a winter storm in these areas is that a winter storm watch is in effect for almost the entirety of Louisiana, which is just crazy to see. This is reaching historic proportions when it comes to snowfall in the southeast. So definitely prepare in New Orleans and surrounding areas. And then for eastern Texas as well, even as far south as the Gulf Coast of Texas, you are under a winter storm watch. Same goes for the southern portion of Mississippi, and only expect the winter storm watches to continue to expand further eastward once we get a little bit closer to when this storm system affects you guys, which would happen right around the Tuesday time frame. So definitely be prepared in those areas. And now shifting into our next snowstorm that's gonna occur within the next 24 hours at this point. We see that winter storm warnings have been issued over a large portion of the Northeast. This includes West Virginia, even portions of Kentucky, the higher elevations of North Carolina, into much of Maryland under winter storm warnings. Same goes for much of Pennsylvania, northern New Jersey, upstate New York, as well as into Connecticut. Boston is involved with this winter storm warning, and much of Massachusetts, and even southern Vermont is now involved. While we have winter weather advisories just outside of that, where the snowfall won't be as heavy, but it still should definitely cause impacts for potentially your Sunday night commute and into Monday. So definitely be prepared for that. So when it comes to this northeast snowstorm, the certainty is as high as you could almost ask for at this point, where both the GFS and the European model are nearly taking exactly identical trajectories and scenarios when it comes to this storm system. So we have a low pressure moving through that did bring some rain showers and snow showers in the Northeast, but there's going to be another small upper level low that you could barely see that's going to enhance the instability once again and develop a new surface level low that should rapidly intensify, which should allow the heavy snowfall to develop at a fairly rapid rate and impact the Northeast. And there's enough cold air for this to happen too. So even the Interstate 95 corridor, cities like Philadelphia, New York City, and Boston get involved, and Washington, D.C. as well. Let me show you guys this because it's a better indication. This one, okay, here we go. So yeah, this is a better indication of what I'm talking about. There's that upper level low that's going to enhance the instability. So we see a rapidly intensifying storm system that brings a pretty large area of moderate snowfall to the northeast, and it's going to move relatively quickly, which is the reason why the snow totals won't be as strong as it would be for a rapidly intensifying storm system, but still should definitely cause some havoc for your commute on Sunday night and into Monday. And taking a look at the European model, it's also very similar at this point. So you guys need to be preparing now, whether you're under a winter weather advisory or winter storm warning, because impacts are very imminent within the next 24 hours, and the forecast is highly certain at this point, even for the cities right up along the northeast, where places like Boston, New York City, and Philadelphia will get involved with anywhere between 3 to 5 inches of snowfall, and potentially more than that in other areas. So here's the official snowfall forecast for this storm system. So in Boston, you should expect potentially 5 to 8 inches of snowfall. New York City, maybe around 3 to 5. Same goes for Philadelphia. Washington, D.C., you're right on the border between experiencing 3 to 5 inches of snowfall to maybe 1 to 3 inches of snowfall. Either way, you do definitely need to prepare for this. And then going into southeastern Pennsylvania, you should expect 3 to 5 inches of snowfall. Into much of Maryland, 3 to 5 inches of snowfall. The higher elevations of West Virginia, maybe around 5 to 8 inches of snow. Albany, 3 to 5 inches of snowfall. So for the most part, the range should be anywhere between 4 to 8 inches of snowfall throughout the northeast, the most populated areas of the northeast. So you definitely want to prepare accordingly in a lot of these areas. So let's go hour by hour to see when exactly you should begin to expect impacts when it comes to snowfall. So during the early morning on Sunday, of course, you shouldn't expect too much impacts, but right around the 7 a.m. time frame, that's when we should begin to see the instability increase, the snowfall develop. So places like Kentucky, West Virginia, and portions of Tennessee start receiving snowfall. Then it really starts to get heavy right around the noon time, where we see that snowfall now by Washington, D.C. At this point, West Virginia is in the thick of the snowfall at this point. So Sunday morning should be the worst in West Virginia, and for Washington, D.C., it should be much of Sunday afternoon where it should be the worst. The snowfall should impact Philadelphia by the early afternoon time frame, and it should be the worst during the afternoon into early evening. And for New York City, we should see that snowfall approach you guys right around the 3 p.m. Point on Sunday, and then this should last until probably the midnight hours going into Monday. And then for Boston, this should end right around the early morning on Monday. So definitely be prepared for this all throughout the Northeast for a significant winter storm. However, there could be more winter storms coming up in the future for a lot of the same areas, in fact. So we do have another possibility of another winter storm happening right behind this one that's expected to happen in the southeast, where we should see another round of instability develop and another small upper level low that should pretty much be the trigger of our next potential winter storm. And we see it impact a lot of the mid-Atlantic states, where we see North Carolina, Virginia, Delmar Peninsula, and New Jersey get involved. This is a bit more in the long-term future, but the GFS model is also showing a very similar forecast, which is making me a little bit more inclined to believe that we could see a snowstorm develop in a fairly similar fashion with an upper level low moving eastward. So I do believe that we will see subsource snow right around potentially the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast by the Friday, January 24th timeframe. The question, of course, remains though where it'll develop, because we see in the GFS small scenario, the snowfall goes a little bit further northward since this upper level low doesn't move as far south. So definitely the trajectory of this upper level low will be key, as I'll keep you guys updated on that once we get more certainty with the forecast. But be aware of that possibility of another winter storm for the mid-Atlantic and Northeast by the time we approach January 24th to the 25th timeframe. And then taking a look at even beyond that point, we could have a Midwest snowstorm impact these areas, but this is in the very long-term future, going over 200 hours out. I'll get more into details with this forecast once we get more certainty and once we get closer to that date. But just keep in mind that we're gonna likely be in a winter storm pattern for quite some time, for pretty much the rest of January for a lot of these areas. So definitely be prepared for not only cold, but that potential of snowstorms moving through. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching.